I'd like to go ahead and get started. If people who are in the lobby, if they could enter, that would be great. Thank you very much. I want to welcome everybody this evening to Michigan City Hall. And I'm Nancy Moldenhauer, I'm chair of the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. And we're one of the co-sponsors for this evening's event. And I won't name off all of our other co-sponsors because there's at least 4 others. But we're so glad you're here today. The Michigan City Sustainability Commission actually has 3 main projects that we're working on in partnership with other groups. The first one is Soul Smart, and we're going after silver designation for Michigan City. We already have bronze, but we wanted to take that extra reach to get to silver. And this is through Indiana University's Sustainability Resilience, and we've been working with them for the past year on this. We're also partnering with Carbon Neutral Indiana. And for people that just can't see that it's possible for them to do solar installation, this is a way to get an assessment, get some tips on how you could reduce your carbon footprint, and actually sign up for a subscription service to become net zero regarding carbon emissions for your home or small business. And then tonight, not least, but most importantly, we're partnering with Solar United Neighbors, and I'm very excited that the Northern Indiana organizer, Dan Robinson, is here with us this evening to present to you Solar 101. Thank you, Dan.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. We're glad you're even behind the mask. I can hear you. Glad you're here. I am Dan Robinson. I am with Solar United Neighbors. We're a national organization that has a program here in Indiana, and I'll talk a little bit more about us in a little bit. But thank you to all of you that are coming. They're here tonight in person. I want to welcome the, looks like 10 now participants on Zoom that are with us. And I think there are even some folks that are joining us on Facebook. So we got it all covered here tonight. We got a nice little turnout. Whoops. I'm not used to standing behind a mic the whole time, so hopefully I'll stay here as we go along and they can keep me on camera that way. So I'm gonna go through the presentation tonight. If you're watching on Facebook or on Zoom, you're welcome to put questions in the chat box, and Caleb, who is helping us from Michigan City, the government here, is going to be monitoring that, and he'll give me those questions later. So just know that you can do that. And of course, all of you here in person, if you have questions as we go along, that's fine. Just know we are going to take about 3 breaks just to check in with you all at each end of each section of tonight's presentation. So if it's a question that you can hang on to till then, that's great. If it's something you're like, I'm going to forget this, I know I'm going to forget this, it's okay. Go ahead and feel free to go ahead and ask it. We'll answer it. And if it's going to take a long time to answer it, we'll put a pin in it and we'll come back to it later. Does that sound okay? Before we get started, I do want to thank Nancy and the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. They have done a lot of work in trying to put this presentation together tonight and promote it. So thank you, Nancy and the group. The other sponsors or partners on this co-op that we're very grateful for are the Northwest Indiana Regional Plan Commission, the Northwest Indiana Green Drinks, which Nancy is a part of there as well, 219 Green Connect, and the Northwest Indiana Just Transition Group. And we are very grateful for all our sponsors in supporting the co-op. So I'm gonna pull that up, Caleb, or there we go. Yep, I can wait. Hopefully you all can see these at an angle here as we go along. If that's an issue and you can't see something, raise your hand and I'll make sure you get what's on the slide if you missed anything. Oh, and just also, those of you that are on Zoom and those of you here in person and on Facebook, I guess you know too, in case you type that question in the chat box. This presentation is being recorded. I'm going to take this out actually. It's just going to bug the heck out of me. Just know that that's taking place. And yeah, we ready? We're good. All right. So a couple things before we get going. I want to take a moment to address the inequities in our current energy system, because what we're trying to do with building rooftop solar as a keystone to that energy system, we want to help address that. Communities of color, particularly Black and Indigenous communities, bear an unfair share of the burden of the cost of the current energy system, but receive fewer benefits. Families of color are disproportionately harmed by higher utility bills and shutoffs, as well as the pollution that results from the production of energy from fossil fuels. And on top of that, housing discrimination is a barrier to home ownership, and thus, at least in Indiana, a barrier to solar ownership. When SUN started, Solar United Neighbors, like how that acronym worked out, Solar United Neighbors, SUN, yeah. When SUN started, we were a group of economically and racially diverse neighbors in Washington, D.C., and they focused on solar because it helped people pay their electric bills. It also helped them stay in their homes at a time when DC was gentrifying very quickly and the whole country was in the middle of a financial crisis. Rooftop solar lets communities invest locally, creates good local jobs, and brings control of the energy system within all our reach. And we're working towards a new energy system that everyone can participate, one that is fair and equitable. When I say we, I mean Solar United Neighbors. We are a national 501c nonprofit that started in 2007. We're a leading solar education and outreach organization, and we help Hoosiers go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And we do that in two main ways. In organizing these co-ops that I'll be talking about later, that helps people purchase solar, consider solar, but then also advocating for policy and laws at the state and national level that are pro-solar, that help people go solar. As far as the co-ops go, we have 10 co-ops going on in and around the state of Indiana, roughly where those stars are. Being the Northern Indiana organizer, I work with the co-ops here in Northwest Indiana, in Northern Indiana, around the South Bend, Elkhart, Goshen area, and in Fort Wayne. We also have co-ops going in Hamilton and Boone counties and in Marion County, Indianapolis. The rest of those stars are with our partner Solarize Indiana. They are another statewide organization that does similar work to what we do. And we partner on some of those co-ops, some of those we do on our own, which Northwest Indiana is one of those we do on our own. And then there's some that Solarize Indiana does on their own. So if you go to that website, bit.ly/Solar Indiana, you will see information about solar in Indiana, as well as links to all those co-ops. So if you know somebody in a different part of the state who's interested and they're looking for some information, they can go there to that website and they can find out some information about co-op maybe in their area. We have a lot of statewide partners that make these co-ops possible. Solarize Indiana is one of them, as well as the Hoosier Environmental Council, the Citizens Action Council, Earth Charter Indiana, Hoosier EVA, Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, and the Sierra Club's Hoosier chapter. And those are our partners here in Northwest Indiana that I mentioned earlier. Just Transition Northwest Indiana, Michigan City's Commission on Sustainability, 219 Green Connect, Green Drinks, and the Northwestern Indiana Regional Plan Commission. We were just talking about this. You know, it was a nice sunny day outside, wasn't it? Yeah, maybe not so much, right? And at least here in Northwest Indiana, it was pretty gloomy. So we get the question a lot. Can you do solar in Indiana? And the answer emphatically is yes. If you look at this solar intensity map, you'll see that the southwestern part of the country obviously has more solar resources than we do here. But we are in that green area, which means we have sufficient solar resources to do rooftop solar in Indiana. And in fact, when you put together rooftop solar and all the big solar utility sized fields that are going in, Indiana in the first part of 2021 was the 4th fastest growing solar state in the country for installations, new installations coming in. Germany, one of the world's leaders, they have a lot less solar resources than we do, and yet they're helping lead the world in that. So we have plenty of solar here, and that's evidenced by this map. You'll see a few of those pins kind of scattered around 2011, where rooftop solar was in Indiana, and it grew greatly in 2017 when the state passed a law to limit net metering, and I'll talk about net metering in a little while. It's continued to grow, and I think if you actually fast forward to 2022, maybe a year from now, that will be a lot more filled in because there's a deadline coming up next year with net metering. And again, I will talk about that in a little bit. So our presentation is going to be in 3 parts tonight. First is on solar technology. The second is on how the solar co-ops work. And the third is a little bit on solar economics. So before I dive into solar technology, anybody got any preliminary questions that okay. Yeah.
I was just reading this, solar gradually starts decreasing in efficiency after 25 years. With no moving parts or anything to wear out, why does it begin to decrease?
Great question, and I will address that. Give me a couple of minutes, and we're going to get into that in this very next section. Okay. All right. So solar technology. How do solar panels work? Well, we're talking about solar photovoltaic. There's lots of different systems out there about how different types of solar systems. We're talking about solar photovoltaic, which means sunlight hits the solar panels. And as somebody who is an engineer put it, it's magic. It turns into electricity. But really what happens is the sunlight excites the electrons in these silicon panels, and that generates the electricity that flows through the wires. That converts that solar energy into electricity. An important terminology as we talk about electricity is the distinction between kilowatts and kilowatt hours. Kilowatts is the capacity of the system. Those are going to be sized typically in a 2 to 12 kilowatt size for a home or a small business. And kilowatt hours is the amount of electricity that is actually used or produced by the panels and used by you at the home. So when you get your electric bill, you're not going to see kilowatts on, you're going to see kilowatt hours. The difference is you may think of a car. A car has a certain amount of horsepower. This car has this engine has X horsepower. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be producing that amount of energy when it's going. That's when you're talking about speed going down the road. So that's kind of the difference between kilowatt and kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours is the unit of energy that is produced or used, and what you see on your bill. And just for reference, in 2019, the average U.S. household used about 877 kilowatt hours per month. So if you think about your own bill, you can kind of see where you are in the average. Those panels there is, each of those panels is 300 watts of a capacity. So all you do to figure out the capacity of a system is you just multiply those watts by how many panels are there, in this case 12, you come up with 3,600 watts or 3.6 kilowatts. So there's 1,000 watts in each kilowatt. So this is a real simple diagram on how a solar photovoltaic system will work. You'll have the panels. These panels are about 5 feet wide by 7 feet tall on average. I mean, you'll get different sizes depending on the type of panel you get, but that's on average about the size, a good size American flag. These will be up on your roof or on the roof of your garage, or there could be a ground mount system if that's what you want at your place, if you have the room for it. The sun hits the panels produce DC or direct current electricity that gets sent through the wires to number 2, the solar inverter. And what the inverter does, it changes that DC electricity into AC or alternating current electricity, which is the kind you use in your home, sends it into your home through the panel, electric panel number 3, where it gets used up by the refrigerator, the computer, the lights, however you use electricity in your home. What you don't use at that particular moment, you have any excess generation, any excess electricity, it's sent out through the utility meter at your house and out into the grid where it gets used by your neighbors and the folks down the road. So that's just, again, a real simple diagram of that. So let's talk about the system components. Now, I know it's kind of hard to see that with the Zoom stuff up there, but that's okay. We'll just leave it there because I can always tell the titles. System components, we're going to talk about the panels. Again, these panels are 7 by 5 or 6 by 3.5. Again, it just sort of depends on the size of panel that you get. It's made up of these individual solar cells that are made of silicon. These then are covered by an encapsulant on the front and the back in the panels. Glass goes over that, very thick glass, kind of like the glass that you would have on your windshield of your car. And then there's a frame that goes around that. And in the back, there's a junction box that hooks into that panel. The panel sends the electricity out through. When you string a bunch of these panels together, then that's what gives you a solar array. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but to answer your question, sir, the panels are guaranteed a certain level of production over typically 25 years. So Generally, that's going to be in the 85 to low 90%. So in other words, at year 25, depending on the panel you buy, they're guaranteed to produce 85 to low 90% of the electricity that they produced in year one. At the end of 25 years, it's not like it falls off a cliff. It is going to go down as time goes by. There are no moving parts in it. You're right, sir. So those don't wear out. But what does break down is the sunlight will break down the physical structure of the silicon cells over time. And so that's where the loss in production comes. Now, I was at a farmer's market in Lafayette this summer, and I was talking to somebody who has panels that they use to heat their water. And they were installed for them in the late 70s. And they were now just trying to find somebody who could come out and fix them because it just broke down. So these were 45 years old. So I can't tell you how long they will last, but I will tell you that they will continue to produce energy after the 25 years is up. That's just the length of the warranty. Does that help? Okay, great.
I have a question. With the steel that, you know, layered,
Mm-hmm.
just like a thermal window, the steel breaks.
I can't promise you that could never happen, but I have never heard of it happen. Whatever that's worth. These panels hold up very well as a rule. And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the warranty and some questions later, but as a rule, they tend to hold up pretty well. So let's talk about inverters. There's a couple different kinds of inverters out there. The first kind is a string inverter. A string inverter is one inverter that will handle all the power coming from all the panels and convert that into AC electricity. So one inverter. A microinverter is an inverter that gets attached to the back of each individual panel. And it does the conversion there. The difference between the two is if you think about the old Christmas lights for the string inverter, if one bulb went out, the entire string went out. So if one of the panels happens to experience a little bit of shade at that point because a cloud is going by, it's going to reduce the production of all the panels. Whereas with a microinverter, it'll just reduce the production of that one panel, and the rest of them, if they're in the sunshine, will continue to produce as they would normally produce. Now, to minimize the impact of that on the string inverters, you can get a DC optimizer to go with that. I was just at Fronius over in Portage, I think. I'm not from the area, so I just follow the Google directions to get there. But they produce inverters, and I was talking to somebody there, and they were saying that they've for the inverters that they have, and I think this is true for a lot of inverters. The string inverters have found other ways to kind of get around that besides the DC optimizers. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, including cost as well as the points. You have more things that could break down necessarily if you have more of the microinverters. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, and that's one of those questions you really want to talk to an installer about. But those are the different types of inverters. So the panel. So the panel, it's a simple connection from the panel, the solar panels, into your electrical panel. Most homes do not need an upgrade on their panel. If you have a panel that has breakers instead of the old fuses, there's a better than even chance you will not need an upgrade. That's not to say that you wouldn't necessarily in your particular situation. And if you do, those can hover in the $1,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 range, depending on the type of panel and your setup and the amount of work that goes into it. Most of the solar companies that we work with are going to be able to replace that panel if it needs be. So you can talk to your installer about that. But like I said, most of them, most panels don't need replacing. The solar panels, the solar array is attached to the roof through a racking system. So here's a typical slanted roof with asphalt shingles. They will put the rack, they'll nail the rack to the roof, and then they will attach the panels to the racking system. Now there's other types of racking systems depending on the type of roof you have. And really, for any roof that you might have, there is a racking system that will work for that. I know a lot of people have metal roofs, for example, now. Well, in a metal roof, they don't even need to have any kind of penetration into the roof. They will just clamp on it. You see the clamps there. They will just clamp on the seams of the metal roof for the racking, and then they'll attach the panels to the rack. Yeah. Yes, you can put these on a pole barn. Yep. Slate roofs, it's a little more expensive because you have to be a little more ginger, but putting those on, you can do that there. Flat roofs, you can do it. Whatever kind of roof you have, there is a racking solution for that. For example, here's a racking system for a flat roof. Ground mount systems. So yes, some people prefer to have a ground mount system instead of a rooftop. We always encourage people to think about rooftops because what else are you using your roof for? And you don't have to take up ground with it. But some people, for various reasons, very legitimate reasons, prefer to have a ground mount system. One of those reasons might be I have the yard to do it, so I want to put the ground mount in because my roof is not facing a direction that'll work, or there's shading over the roof. I want to put a ground mount system in. Ground mounts can be a little more expensive because you have to have the trenching to run the wires from the ground mount to the panels and to the inverter. But certainly it's a great option. I just emailed somebody about inquiring about a ground mount system here in the Northwest Indiana area about that earlier today. The other reason is pointing them due south, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. South's the best place, best direction to point your panels. It's not the only direction you can, but it's the best. And so some people choose a ground mount because that's the only way they can have their panels oriented south. So what makes a good roof for solar? Again, south facing roof is the best. However, at our latitude and welcome, come on in. At our latitude and with the efficiency of panels, a roof that faces east or west works just as well too. Does not just as well, but works fine too. The only direction that we tell people probably won't work around here is if it's facing north. But east-west is fine. South is the best. You want to make sure you have enough space on the roof. You want to have a minimum of about 200 square feet for mounting a system on your roof for a minimal size system. Now that 200 square feet does not have to be in a rectangle, a perfect rectangle. I was talking with somebody the other day who had a system designed for him that he had a lot of multiple small roofs in all over his place. So he had 4 different arrays arranged around the roof, small arrays. So you might have a big roof to put it, but there might be a chimney going through it. Well, they just put the panels around the chimney. So about 200 square feet, you want no shading if you can avoid it at all. A little bit of shading might be okay, but certainly you don't want the whole thing shaded for a good portion of the day. And the roof condition. We tell people that they need to have, if there's less than 10 years of life left in their roof, they probably want to get the roof replaced before they put the system on there. Now, there was a guy I was talking to who said, yeah, I know that, but I didn't want to miss out on the production. So I went ahead and had him put it up, and then I paid the money to have them take them down and put the new roof on and then put them back on. So you can do it. It just costs, and it doesn't hurt the system. It just costs you money to pay to have the panels taken off and put back on. In his mind, he felt like the production he gained paid for taking them off. But generally, we tell people less than 10 years, you kind of want to get that replaced first. So batteries. What happens when the power goes out on the grid? I talked about the inverters earlier. Their main job is to convert DC electricity into AC electricity. The other job they do, though, however, is they shut the system down when the electricity in the grid goes out. And the reason they do that is they're required to do that because you don't want to send unexpected stray electricity voltage out into the grid when there's a utility worker out there trying to repair the lines. So it's a safety feature. So because that's the case, some people consider having a battery in case there's a power outage. So that's one reason to have a battery. So if you have frequent utility outages in your area, you might want a battery. If you have critical loads at home, like a well pump or health equipment that you absolutely need if the power goes out, no matter what, you might want to consider having a battery. Some people just like them for emergency or disaster preparedness. The one thing we tell people not to do, at least at this point in the development of batteries, is don't buy it because you think you're going to make money off of it by storing electricity and sending it out to the grid again. They're expensive right now. The price has come down and it'll continue to come down. But it's just not to the point yet where it makes sense economically to purchase a battery. Now, we have a guide at our website on battery storage for homeowners. There's a lot of different guides at solarunitedneighbors.org if you want to go there. There's stuff about ground mounts, there's stuff about batteries, there's stuff about all kinds of stuff, all kinds of topics on that website. So I encourage you to check it out. But that's one of the guides that we have on there. What some people do is they will talk to their installer and they'll say, you know what, I think I'm going to get batteries somewhere down the road. I don't know when, but I'd like to have the system set up so that it's easy to put a battery in the system at some point. So you can do that. You can have it set up so that you can install batteries later. And if you want to have it now for all these reasons, very legitimate reasons, and people do, then that's great too. So again, that's how the basics on how a solar array works. The solar array at the roof generates electricity, sends it to the inverter. Just a quick second here. Sends it to the inverter, and then that goes to the electric panel, which is used by the house, and the excess is sent to the utility meter out to the electric grid. Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned having a person that had to have the solar panels taken off, a new roof put on,
Mhm.
and then solar panels put back on.
Yep.
So I am assuming that during this period of time, he had no electricity. Or am I wrong?
No, this particular individual was hooked up to the electric grid. So in most cases, you're going to be hooked up to the electric grid so that like at night when your panel, if you don't have batteries, and at night when your panels aren't producing electricity, you're going to draw electricity from the electric grid. So in his case, when he took the panels off, he was drawing electricity from the grid. Now I don't know how long he had them off. I'm sure it was more than a day because he had to replace the roof, but does that make sense? So like in this instance, see, the solar panels are producing electricity, send it to the inverter to the panel where it's used by the home. And then if you have any excess electricity, it's sent out to the grid because in most cases, you're still going to be hooked up to the electric grid. So I'm assuming most folks here are NIPSCO customers. There might be a few folks that are, I don't know if there's any municipal electric companies, but there might be some rural electric cooperative folks here. Whatever your electric provider is, unless you want to have an off-grid system, which you can do, you're going to be hooked up to a utility still. Does that make sense?
But if you went off grid, then you wouldn't have anything.
Yes, if you're off-grid, but most folks are still hooked up to the grid. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. Well, so you have to, what would be the approximate time for an installation of the panels? If you mean the actual workers come out and doing the work, it depends on your system and how big it is. I know lots of people that get it done in a day. But that I can't promise that because that's up to the installer. And he, like one gentleman I know lives over in Miller Beach. They came to do his put his panels in, and there was a miscommunication by the city to approve it, and they had to come out and look at it, and they still managed to get it done in a day, but it was pretty tight. Yeah, it just depends on the complications of the system and that kind of thing. Yeah.
I guess I'm just not understanding. How in the billing, how do you stop the utility in using the utility kilowatt and
Sure. Sure. So if you look at this diagram, you'll see that the electricity from the panels goes to your electric panel first, and then it goes into the house. So the only time you draw electricity from the grid is when you need it. So if you're producing electricity from your own solar panels and it's being used by the house, that means there's less electricity needed to be drawn from the grid. You know, so you can kind of think of it as like if you're filling a pitcher and I've got 2 bottles of water here and I'm filling it with this one, it seems like it's filling it just fine. I don't add any more, but if this starts to run out, then I added the second one. So this is my solar panels filling up the electrical pitcher in my house. But if that starts to run out, then I just add the electrical grid into that pitcher.
I guess I just visualize it as both pictures are pouring at the same time. How does,
It's just, well, they could be because you might not be producing enough electricity to cover your electrical needs at that moment.
you know, if you're hooked up to the grid
Mhm.
and it's giving you kilowatts.
Kilowatt hours, yep.
How does it know to stop giving you kilowatts?
Because the electricity is only going to go in when it's needed. It's like, you know, if you're at night and you're not running much electricity, it's not forcing electricity into your house. It's only sending in what the house is calling for. So if let's say, these numbers are going to be way off, but just as an example, let's say at a given moment, your house is drawing 10 kilowatt hours. Okay. It wants to use 10 kilowatt hours, and your panel is producing 10 kilowatt hours. Then there's no pressure to pull from the electrical grid because it is not calling for anymore because your panels are sufficiently fulfilling your need. But let's say your panels are only producing 5 kilowatt hours, then the house is going to like, wait a minute, I need 5 more. I'm going to pull it from the grid. Yeah.
You have the utility have a different meter when you have this?
Yes.
They changed the meter.
Yep.
So what she's asking is, it's going to work through the meter. That's how that's.
Yep. The meter is the gatekeeper.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, so
You get a different meter.
Yep.
Okay, so,
I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't understand your question. I'm sorry.
so the meter is currently have gets changed.
Switched out. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Oh, sure. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I got to remember to do that. Thank you for the reminder, Caleb. So for the folks online, the question was, how does if I understood it correctly, how does the electric utility know to send or not send electricity into the house? And it's because a new meter is put into the system, and that meter is the gatekeeper, and it tells what to do. Sorry, I didn't quite get your
No,
question.
I didn't know how to phrase the question.
Yeah.
So the battery, I'm just wondering how, if I would have enough electricity through solar power, we're a family of 5.
Mhm.
So how do you know, I guess I look at my bill and see how much I use. That would explain how many solar panels I need.
Yeah. So
Answer that.
okay, that's great. So the question that she answered for herself was, how do you know how big of a system to get? And it's based on your electricity needs. The installer is going to ask for some examples of electric bills, and they're going to look at that and they're going, okay, this household uses this much electricity. They need this many panels. Yes, sir.
My question is this only for roof or can you have it in your yard?
Yes. The question was, is it for just roof or can you have it in the yard? That's the ground mount system I talked about earlier. So you can have it in your yard. Yep. Yep. Yes, sir.
Does anybody use a backup generator?
Yes. The question was, does anybody use a backup generator? And the answer is yes. Yep. I did a presentation not too long ago and someone talked about, and there was a solar owner in the audience, and he talked about having a generator hooked up into a system still with electrical panels. So it took the place of a battery, basically.
So how much can you store on a battery?
How much can you store on a battery depends on the size of battery you get.
I mean, like days worth or?
It could be, well, okay, again, it depends on how much electricity you use and how big the battery is. But yes, at least a day's worth. You can do that. Now you can get smaller batteries and you use a lot of electricity. It'll last less than that. It could last longer than a day. It just really depends on your situation.
I guess I understood the battery is kind of like a generator, so it's not, like our electricity goes out a lot. So we use a generator a lot, and I guess that's what I understood the battery was.
Yes, the battery takes the place, could take the place of a generator. Now, I know other folks, I think I talked to somebody who had both, a generator and a battery. But generally speaking, the principle of the battery is it would take the place of the generator because it would provide you with some electricity when the power was out. Yeah. Sure.
The first question on here is from Crystal. Is there a basic setup to purchase, or does it depend on how size or preference?
Is there a basic setup to purchase, or does it depend on size and preference? It depends on size and preference. The variety of setups you could have at your home are pretty varied depending on your needs, upon your budget, upon your house setup. Some folks want to purchase a system and have the wherewithal to do that. That covers 100% of their electricity. Some folks purchase a system that only covers 50% or 25%. So it really, that depends on your needs and your budget and the setup that you have at the house.
And the second question is from Facebook from Paula. Does it store power in winter conditions at the snow, or do you have to have batteries?
The system will work. Okay, the question is, does the system store in the winter time, or do you have to have batteries? Is that right?
Yes. Does it store power in winter conditions, heavy snow?
So the system will work the same in the winter time as it does in the summertime, in the sense that it produces electricity, and if you have a battery system, it'll store that. The only thing that will happen with heavy snow in the winter is if the panels are covered, you might lose some production at that point while the panels are covered with snow. Typically, the sun will come out fairly soon and it'll melt that snow and it'll slide off. You might lose a little production during that time. But again, the production is not real high in the winter, not because it's cold, because actually panels work better in the cold. It's just because there's less sunlight, and the sunlight is at an angle lower in the sky where you don't get as much direct sunlight on it. But the snow will not affect the battery's ability to store electricity, other than the fact that batteries on the opposite don't work as well in the cold as they do in warmer temperatures. Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit about net metering. So I mentioned that earlier. Net metering is the principle that the large utilities are required to give you a 1-for-1 credit for every kilowatt hour you send out to the grid. So if you go back to that diagram we had earlier, number 4 in that was any electricity that you're not using at the moment, you send out to the grid, but it goes through your meter. This new meter that you have will measure how much electricity you send out to the grid, as well as how much electricity you draw from the grid. That's why they put a new meter in. Under net metering, for every kilowatt hour you send out, you get a credit of 1 kilowatt hour off your bill. You don't get any money, but you get credit. That makes a huge difference in the financial picture for purchasing a system in the payback period. Because even with a small system, you may have some moments where you're not using all the electricity that you're producing. Now, with a small system, it may not happen very often, but if you get a system that's meant to cover 90 or 100% of your electricity, you're going to have moments where you're not using all that electricity. So if you send that out to the grid and you get that credit, it really helps the payback period on your system. However, that's just the 5 large utilities, investor-owned utilities, NIPSCO being one of them. Municipal systems or rural electric cooperatives are not required to have net metering. So they're going to have their own policy. So if you're in one of those, you need to talk to the folks at your REMC or at the municipal system to find out what their system is for crediting excess generation. Here's a way to think about net metering. On the left is a daily solar production, on the right is monthly. And this is meant simply as a demonstration, and it's meant if a system is meant to cover 100% of your electricity, okay? If you look at the daily solar production, the orange there, it's going to be higher in the middle, obviously, when the sun is high in the middle of the day. You're going to produce more electricity. However, your usage, if you're the typical household in the US, is going to be higher in the morning as people are getting ready for the day. Then they go off to school or go off to work or go outside and do something or run errands or whatever it might be. They're not there as much in the middle of the day. Come home at night, you're cooking dinner, you're watching TV, whatever you're doing, your electricity is going to bump back up. You'll notice that those curves don't match. So what net metering does is it's, in a sense, stores that electricity as credit when you send it out to the grid, and then you use that credit in the morning and the night when you're not producing as much electricity. Same way it works with the monthly solar production. Again, your energy usage is that purple or blue bar going across there. It's not gonna be that even, of course, this is just demonstration, but that's your average energy use. You're gonna get more production in the summertime from your solar panels than you do in the wintertime. Again, because the sun is higher, the days are longer. You store the credit for that excess electricity in the summertime, and then you use it up in the wintertime. Because you can roll those credits over from month to month. They don't go away until you use them. The only time they disappear is if you go to sell your house. Because they don't transfer to the new owner. Net metering can, but those don't. Problem is with net metering in Indiana is back in 2017, the state legislature passed a law to do away with net metering, the requirement of net metering. So that net metering goes away July 1st of 2022. If you get if you're one of those in the investor-owned utilities like NIPSCO, you get your system installed and hooked up and running before July 1st of next summer, you get net metering for 10 years until 2032, which is about approximately the payback time period with net metering of most solar arrays that people purchase. Again, it's not guaranteed, but that's approximately that. After 2032, the credit you get on your excess production is going to be, by law, would be wholesale plus 25%, a much lower credit amount on your electricity. Plus, the large utilities are trying to change the way that excess generation is measured. It's very complicated, but just suffice it to say that if they are successful, that lowers that even more in terms of the credit that you get. If you install your system after June 30th of next summer, that's also the system of credit you get for your excess generation. So that's why we are trying to push these co-ops as hard as we are right now to get people to consider going solar so they can take advantage of net metering. Any questions about net metering? The deadline is you have to have it installed and up and running by June 30th next summer. Now, actually, a couple of things I should say about that. There's a lot of confusion with NIPSCO right now because the law, the net metering law, made a distinction between reserved and non-reserved. Reserved is a certain amount of, let me back up. Each of the utilities have a cap, a certain percentage of their production, electrical production out of the year that solar can account for. So if, and I forget what the percentage is, but let's just say it's 5%. Once 5%, once there's enough solar, customer-owned solar in their utility network that equals 5% of the annual production, they can cut off net metering. Vectron in Southern Indiana has already reached that cap, and they've cut off net metering for the folks in Southern Indiana. Now, that cap is divided into reserved and non-reserved. There's a certain amount reserved for residential, and then the rest, like commercial or industrial business, those are non-reserved. And there's different caps for each of those. NIPSCO has reached the cap for the non-reserved. So they had to guarantee net metering, they had to get the process at least begun by October 1st. So that's gone. However, for residential in NIPSCO's territory, you are eligible for net metering until June 30th or July 1st of next year. Okay. I've had a lot of people say, I saw this on the website, or somebody told me that you couldn't get net metering. That's only for business, industrial, commercial. Residential is still good. Now, the second thing you need to know, back in 2017, there was another deadline for net metering. The State Utility Commission said, all right, this is what you have to do by this date in order to get net metering. They laid it out. This time, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Committee has chosen not to clarify that. So what constitutes having your system installed to get net metering before July 1st is a little fuzzy at this point. Does that mean it's up and running and producing electricity? Does that mean you've applied for a permit? What exactly does that mean? And the utilities have not clarified that yet. So it approximately, I talked to an installer the other day, at least for his company, from the time they come out and you sign a contract to the time and that electricity is flipped and it's running in your home is about 2 months. I mean, it can only take a day to install, but you got to do all the design. You got to get the materials. You got to come in. You got to install it. You got to apply for the permits. They got to come out and inspect it. They got to hook it up. All this stuff. It's about 2 months on average. So what I would generally tell people is, if you sign a contract by sometime in March, you'll probably be just fine. But I wouldn't want to go much later than that. The deadline for this to sign up for the co-op is the end of February here in Northwest Indiana. But you can get moved, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. You can get moving on a system much sooner before that. But just be aware of those two things. Yeah. Yeah.
The deadline, you say 2032, is that January of 2032?
July 1st of 2032 is the deadline for when net metering ends.
And my second one is, does the utility company charge you to replace the meter?
She asked, does the utility company charge you to replace the meter? I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that if it's a typical, what tends to happen with installers that we contract or that bid on these co-ops is it's a one price covers all the normal stuff. So if your utility normally charges for a utility switch out, it'll be covered in the price of your system. If they don't, if that's depending on your situation or whatever, then that gets a little fuzzy. You want to clarify that with the installer. I wish I had a better answer than that, but
No, I think so. I already know the answer.
yeah.
If you're dealing with a co-op, what do you call the outside? Does the gas have to turn or what
If you're dealing with a rural electric municipal co-op, how do you find out if they have net metering?
Yeah.
Great question. If I were you, my first thing would be I'd go to their website and look for solar, look for customer-owned generation. Distributed generation is another term that often gets used. And see on the website if they have a policy there. A lot of places do, some places don't. If it's a small REMC, they may not have it on there. If you don't get the answer, then I would call. And you may even want to call anyway just to confirm. But yeah. There's a couple, I can think of 2 right now, REMCs around the state that offer net metering. But that's generally not the rule. Generally, municipal utilities or REMCs will offer less than net metering. I think I've run across 1 or 2 that didn't offer anything. Yeah. We can talk about that more if you want, but yeah. So some frequently asked questions. How long do systems last? Well, that kind of gets into the warranties thing. I already talked about the systems are generally warranted, the panels for production are generally warranted for 25 years. The inverters, it depends on the inverter and the company you get them from. I've seen anywhere from like 10 to 25 years on inverters for warranties. The panels in terms of the product warranty, in other words, free of defects in terms of how they operate. That can be anywhere from 10 to 25 years. The co-op in Northern Indiana, pretty much all of their panels that they offered from that installer were about 25 years on their on the equipment itself. The labor from the installation company could be anywhere from 2 to 10 years, depending on the company. Some more reputable companies will have a little bit longer warranty on their workmanship. Some of these you can buy extender warranties, pay a little extra to get the warranty extended. Maintenance. The maintenance on these is pretty minimal. As you said, sir, there's no moving parts in them. So it's nothing like that can break down. Some people asked, well, what about snow? Should I get the snow off them? You don't want to do that because you'll end up you could easily scratch the panels if you're trying to get the snow off there, and you don't want to do that. The only maintenance I've really heard on these is maybe once a year, somebody might hose them down. Please don't use soap or any kind of abrasive cleaner on them, just a hose with water if you do that to get the dust off. But I also know people who don't do that. So the maintenance is pretty minimal. property value and taxes. In Indiana, you, you're, by law, you are excluded from your property assessment going up. In other words, your property tax is going up, and that is not supposed to happen if you have panels put on, solar system put on your house. That doesn't mean that the local establishment might do that. They may not be aware that they can't do that. There is a state form to file so that your taxes do not go up when you get your panels installed. As for property value, I have seen this very wildly in terms of studies that are done on whether or not your property value goes up with installation of panels. Generally speaking, that's yes, it will go up because here somebody's buying a home that produces its own electricity. It's going to save them money. The question more is how much. We like to take a conservative view of this in the sense that for every dollar you spend on a solar system, you can kind of think of that as increasing the value, resale value on your home. So if you spend $10,000, you can think about the resale value going up about 10,000. That's a conservative rule of thumb. I've seen some studies that say it's more. As my dad used to tell me, something is only worth what somebody will pay you for it. So, but yes, your property value in terms of resale should go up. Just it's a matter of how much. Homeowners insurance. It's a little more complicated answer to this, but generally speaking, your homeowners insurance will not go up because of the panels. But you want to tell your homeowners insurance company that they're there so that they can be replaced if your house burns down or something. The only time I've heard of your homeowners insurance going up is if you're at the cap of the value of your home in terms of what it's insured for. So there's going, if you've got your home, because they're not tailored to your home, right? They're going to be in certain increments that the insurance company is going to charge you for. So if your home is insured for up to $250,000 on your plan, and it's actually worth $250,000, and you add panels to it, then that might take your homeowner's insurance up. But rare are we right at that cap. Most times our homes are worth a little less than what they're ultimately capped at for the insurance. So it's generally not going to go up. But that's why you want to talk to your homeowner's insurance company, let them know that they're there, and you can sort that out. Weather damage, these are pretty tough. They're rated for hailstorms. They're going to hold up. I've heard stories of people who had to replace the roof. They took the panels off, and the roof underneath the panels was in great shape, while the roof all around it was not. So these are very they'll hold up well in all kinds of weather. We talked about snow already. Will an HOA allow solar on my home? It depends on your HOA, your homeowners association. This goes for historic districts too. I really encourage people to talk to the folks that are the leadership of their HOA or their historic district and find out what the regulations are. I've been on a couple of emails lately with a couple of folks who are running into problems with their homeowners association, want to know how to proceed. This is where joining a co-op can be helpful because it would provide some resources and some support for that. A lot of homeowners associations, though, if you install them where they can't be seen from the street, it's not a big deal. But it really depends on the actual place that you're in. So you really want to talk to the leadership. Yeah, Caleb.
We have a question from Lawrence. The question is, do the panels work with bright light, or does it have?
Wow. The question was, did the panels work in bright light, or does it have to be sunshine? Well, I suspect it has to be sunshine or light similar to sunshine. So just a bright bulb of any kind isn't necessarily going to cut it. But that's just me guessing at an answer. Lawrence, if you're out there watching, if you want an answer better than that, let me know in the chat box, and I will try to track it down for you and put your email there, and I'll find out the answer for you. But I suspect that's the answer. Yeah.
For state or federal, are there any deductions? Like sometimes there's different deductions.
There is a tax credit, which I'll talk about in the third section when we get to economics, but there's a good question though. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. The question was, they have a hot barn And would these suck up some of the heat to keep the barn from getting hot? You know, I think they, I don't think they would make it hotter. I think they would actually relieve that a little bit. But again, that's just me guessing. If you think about it, your barn is at least getting hot, at least in part, because the sun is hitting what I'm going to guess is either a metal roof. So and it's heating up that metal, which is radiating heat into the barn. So if these panels are on top of that, they're going to absorb that sunlight. And I'm going to guess yes, it's going to make a difference. But that's just me guessing at that answer. Yeah, it would be a question for an installer, but if you want me to track it down for you, I will. Just let me know. Okay. So any other questions on the technology before we move on? And if you think of it later, you can ask it later. That's fine. We good on line, Caleb? All right. We're going to talk a little bit about how solar co-ops work. So what a solar co-op is simply, in this case, I should say solar and EV charger co-op, is simply a group buy opportunity where you get to be a part of a group. And because you're part of that group, the installer is going to give their best price to the group because they want the business. That's just it basically in a nutshell. You're not tied to anybody else in terms of what you decide to get. It's strictly an opportunity to get a really good and also support from it. So why go with a co-op? Well, you get your best value on the installation. We don't say the best price because, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, co-op members are the ones that choose the installer from a competitive bid process. And sometimes the members of the co-op say, you know, this is the cheaper price, but this company over here has a better track record, or they might have something else that speaks positively to them. So you get the best value on the installation. Usually it's a really good price too, but you get the best value. You get support throughout the process of considering going solar from myself, Solar United, and our entire organization, Solar United Neighbors. So if there's a question I can't answer for you, like, does your barn get as hot? I've got a whole team behind me that I can go find out the answer from. And I am known for asking lots of questions, so I don't mind doing that at all. You get to connect with other solar enthusiasts. Like tonight, you get to hear the questions of other folks. We have a Solar United Neighbors Indiana Facebook group you can join. You can post questions on there and get answers. It's a great forum for finding out more information. And you get to be part of a growing solar movement. There's a lot happening in Indiana right now around solar. And if you want to get involved in that and advocating for that and being a part of all of us working to make the state better for solar, for residential rooftop solar, this is the place to be. Another advantage is you get a Sun membership. If you join the co-op, which is free, you get a Sun sticker and a magnet. You get a 10% discount on our online store, which Nancy has a shirt on tonight from that store. We're glad for that. You get to take part in member-only events online, and you get access to even more resource guides in our membership portal. So those are some advantages for joining. It's normally, I think, $25 to join us, Solar United Neighbors, but if you join a co-op, it's free. So who picks the installer? Co-op members do. And I'm in the process of doing that right now because we're hoping to have our installer selection committee held the first week or two of November. So now's a great time to sign up for the co-op if you want to have a hand in that, because what happens is we conduct a competitive bid process. We send out a request for bids to a number of different installers. They send us their bids. We compile that information and we share that with the members of the co-op who volunteer to be on the installer selection committee. We hold that meeting on Zoom. We share with you the information, and then the group decides which installer to go with. So for example, when we did the Fort Wayne co-op and had their installer selection committee about 3 weeks ago, we had 4 companies bid on that. For the Northern Indiana co-op, we had 3 companies bid on that. It's either 3 or 4 for the Northwest Indiana, I can't remember now, but we've already conducted the RFP and the bid process. So they get together, and what the criteria is up to the members, but we survey, whenever you join the co-op, you get a little questionnaire about what's important to you. Is price important to you? Is equipment quality? What's the most important thing? Warranties, experience, whatever it is. We take that survey information, we share that with the installer selection committee members, and based on what the co-op membership as a whole are looking for, and based on the RFP that the companies submit, then that group decides what the installer company will be. And so Sun is installer neutral. We don't have a preference. It's up to the co-op members. So this chart here is on the back, on one of the sides of the handout, a little house shaped. And for those of you that are watching online on Facebook, if you want the handouts, you'll have to put your email in the chat box, and Caleb hopefully can copy those and I can get those from him. If you're on Zoom, we have your email information and I will get you these handouts. We just couldn't send them out to you ahead of time because we didn't know who was coming for sure. The co-op happens in 3 stages. The first stage is the grow the co-op stage, where people learn about the solar co-op through sessions like this. We spread the word in the media. We ask people to share it with their friends and their family members and their neighbors. We get people to sign up. Once we get about 30 members or so, and actually we're not going to wait till 30 with this. We've got about 21 members in the co-op now, and I'm going to guess we're going to gain a few in the next week or so. We're going to go ahead and have the installer selection committee. We'll send out, you get asked whether you want to be on it when you sign up for the co-op. For those that say yes, I try to set the date in conjunction with them, but then we also send out, once that date is set, I'll send out an invitation to all the co-op members and say, hey, if you want to be a part of this, this is when it's happened, let me know. We get together, we look at those bids, the installer is selected. So that's, like I said, that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. And after that, the installer will be in touch with all the co-op members to set up a time to come look at their place, to design a system specifically for them and give them a quote at the co-op price. At that point, it's free to join the co-op. It's free to get the design and the quote. There's no obligation to purchase anything if you join the co-op. But it's at that point you decide, do I want to do this or do I not? And it's totally up to you. There will be a deadline, a sign-up deadline to sign a contract in order to get that price, but it's up to you if you want to do that. Of course, we hope you will. But if you do, they will come out and install that system and you'll be producing electricity from sunshine. And then towards the end of the co-op, we have a little celebration to celebrate the success of the co-op and the installations that were done and all the people that got to learn more about solar along the way. We used to do that in person. These days we're doing it on Zoom. Hopefully we'll go back to in person at one point. Yeah. Great question. To this point, there have not. So what I did was, for the companies that bid on the Northwest Indiana co-op about 2 weeks ago, I sent out an email to their contacts on that and asked them, hey, are you anticipating any supply chain issues? And if you are, what's your plan for addressing that? Let me know if you are by this date. And I didn't hear back from any of them. So at this point, we're just moving straight ahead because we're assuming that they're okay.
I have a follow-up question. So we probably fall in the category of our roof is 15 years old, and so we come and wait for solar. Our roof is next 5 or 10 years. So how do we go later to join a different co-op, or have to wait for 10 years?
Yeah, so the question was, I'm sorry, what was your question? Yeah, just the question before this, what was? Supply chain. I'm sorry, I forgot to repeat that on for Facebook and Zoom. The question was, are there supply chain issues? And that was the answer. And your question is, you've got a 15-year-old roof and you're thinking you're going to replace it in the next 5 or 10 years. And so what should we do? Should we join the co-op or not? If you think that you're going to have to wait to put in a system, then I wouldn't join the co-op because the deadline to get the price for the co-op is going to be in March, I think. This is our second co-op in the Northwest Indiana area. With net metering ending, I'm a little unsure about how often we're going to be doing co-ops. We'll still be doing them. I'm just a little unsure about the timing and the frequency. We could very well come back in X number of years and do it again. But this is true for everybody. If at some point, like you say, well, I'm interested in solar, but now's not the right time. And then a year from now or 10 years from now, you decide, yeah, now's the time for me to go solar, and we're not doing a co-op in the area. Solar United Neighbors offers a help if you go solar, quote unquote, on your own. We have a Go Solar help desk that you can call and set up a 15-minute appointment and get your questions answered, or email and get questions answered for free. We always encourage people to get 3, if you're going outside the co-op, we always encourage people to get 3 bids for a system. So if you schedule that 15-minute appointment with a Go Solar Pro in our organization, you can go through those 3 bids and they can help you sort out what the best option is. So there is assistance from our organization if you decide to go solar outside the co-op. Other questions about the co-op or yeah? So in Northwest, the question was in Northwest Indiana, how many companies are installing solar? This area. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, because it depends. Do you mean how many companies, and I don't even know the answer to this question either, but how many companies in Northwest Indiana are installing solar, or how many companies are installing solar in Northwest Indiana? Because the difference is, like one of the companies that bid on this co-op and actually had the last co-op we did in Northwest Indiana was Jefferson Electric, and they're based out of Indianapolis. So we sent out, what we did was we did a statewide call RFP, a call for proposals from solar companies. And in that statewide RFP, we said, here's the list of co-ops we're going to do this year. Let us know which ones you want to have a bid on. And like I said, we didn't hear, I was in touch with maybe 20 companies. And we only got bids from maybe 6 or 7. And out of that 6 or 7, I think 4, maybe 3, but I think 4 bid on Northwest Indiana. Yeah.
Can we get them names? So that way we can get quotes from them?
If you join, those bids are private and only available to the installer selection committee's members.
I mean, their names and numbers, so they can come give us a quote.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't have them off the top of my head, but if you want to send me an email and there's an email address in the handout, I can tell you what companies. Yeah. Yes, sir. You're asking if you can do it yourself, if you know what you're doing. The answer to that is yes. It's your home, you can do that. You can't do that on somebody else's home if you're not licensed, but you can do it on your own. And I've talked to a couple of people who have said, can you just point me to somebody who will sell me the equipment? The companies we work with are generally, although there might be some, but generally they're not in the wholesale business of selling you equipment, but you can go online and find it. And that might be a moment where you want to join the Sun Facebook group, because there are people on there who have done it themselves, and it's a good place to ask questions. Is that good? Yeah. Okay. Yes, Kayla.
Based on what you said, each individual co-op member can customize their own, for example, solar size, in or off grid, with or without that.
Question is, can each individual co-op member personalize their own system? Yes, that is the point. And not everybody is going to have the same system. Now you're going to but if you want to do it with a co-op, you'll have to personalize it within the set of equipment options that the installer offers. So what'll happen is the installer will say, well, this is our base model and this is how much it costs per kilowatt. But if you want to upgrade for this much money, you can do that. And if you want to choose this inverter instead of that inverter, this is how much this one will cost, and that's how much that one will cost. If you want to do a ground mount, this is the additional cost for the trenching, for the wires. So it's within the equipment selections of that co-op that installers bid. But yes, the point is everybody can personalize this to your situation. Okay. Move along here. Solar economics. So this is the price increase on average with the different investor-owned utilities. The green line across the top is Vectren in Southern Indiana. They are the most expensive. But just below that, in orange, is NIPSCO. And as of 2020, they had the second most expensive utility electric rates in the state. On average, the price has increased about 40% in the last 10 years. So it has gone up greatly. And in fact, I know this isn't you all, but I&M, which handles around South Bend, yours are I&M. So the monthly electric bills in the last 4 years have gone up on average 29%. And they just put in a request for an increase in their rates for 6% with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Committee. So 6%.
Only 6,
Only 6. Yeah, only 6.
not 17 or higher.
No, but it adds up fast. I will say that. But yes. So this is what solar's done in the last 10 years. it has gone down greatly. Now, these are national averages. I've heard in parts of Indiana 10 years, 11 years ago, it was even higher than $6.50 a kilowatt. But it's gone down. I think that's like it's less than half of what it was 10 years ago. Now, that's the blue line on average. $2.84 a watt is a little more expensive than the price we typically see in the co-ops, although some of the bids are around that range. But generally speaking, the bids are a little bit less than that. And in fact, you'll see the line at the bottom underneath that, the red and yellow, that's the average sun price per watt. And we average, I think it's, about 15% lower than what you would get outside the co-op. That's the average. Again, depending on what the installer selection committee decides, it may not match that, but on average, it's about 15% less. The cost of solar, breaking that down into three parts, the soft cost of labor and the system components. So the system components have come down greatly. The hardware that goes into the system that we talked about earlier, the cost of that has dropped a lot. The labor costs have dropped as well. What has not dropped are the soft costs. The soft costs are permitting. The big thing is customer acquisition by the solar companies. In other words, money they have to spend to get customers, advertising, whatever it might be. And that's where the co-op really comes, saves people money, is because we are delivering to the installer a group of people that are really interested in solar. They know that, so they put in their best bid in order to get that. Yeah.
When you talk about the cost there of solar going down, that cost is based on purchasing equipment and installing it for its capacity and.
Yep. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry, online. She was asking this drop in price, that's for the equipment and the installation and everything involved. Yes. It's a
Cost for the equipment has
drop, the cost for labor has come down a little bit, but it's the soft costs that haven't come down. So this is going to be on the other side of that sheet you have that has a little house on it. This is a pricing example. First thing I would say is don't get too caught up in the exact numbers. This is more demonstrative than it is literally what you would get, again, because it depends on the system you ultimately purchase. But in average, co-op price in Indiana, a 4 kilowatt system or an 8 kilowatt system. On average, the systems in Indiana tend to run 6 to 7%, just to give you some sort of 6 to 7 kilowatts, I'm sorry, as an average size. But these are 4 and 8 kilowatt examples. At $2.56 a watt for installation, you're looking at a little over $10,000 for the 4K and almost $20,480 for the 8K system. The federal tax credit, which is when you install a system, you get a 26% federal tax credit. That is money that comes off your taxes, not off your income as a deduction, but off your taxes. So if you take the 26% federal tax credit, that lowers the two prices down to $7,500 or $15,000. An estimate of 1 year's worth of electric savings of $700 and $1,400. An estimated 10 years cumulative savings, again with net metering, of $7,400 or almost $15,000. The estimated lifetime savings, again, over the warranty period of that array of 25 years. It's going to keep producing after that, but for 25 years, you're going to save about almost $16,000 in electricity on the 4K system and almost $32,000 on the 8K system. So if you compare that to the net cost that you have at the beginning, you're looking at net profit, not savings, but profit of $8,300 on the 4K system and $16,770 on the 8K system. So that gives you a rough sense of the economics of this. So the payback period is going to tend to be, if you look at that, the estimated 10-year savings, $7,400 is pretty close to the $7,500 net cost on the 4K system. And the $14,900 on the 8K system is pretty close to the $15,000 of the net cost on the larger system. So again, in this example, it's around the 11-year mark with net metering that you would have a return on your investment. Yeah.
Is the 26% federal tax credit for just the year that you install it?
No, you can roll that over. In other words, if you don't pay enough taxes. So the question is the tax credit just for the year you install it? Yes, in the sense that you can only take you can only take it once. But the credit, if you don't pay enough taxes to claim all of that tax credit, so in other words, if you're getting $2,600 off your system, but you only pay $1,500 in taxes, you can roll what's left of that credit over to the next year. The IRS is less than clear on this. I've heard anywhere from 3 to 5 years total rolling it over. We're not tax professionals, so you really need to consult your tax accountant to know exactly how that translates. I just know you can do it over multiple years.
Will that tax credit end in 22?
The question, will the tax credit end in 22? I'll talk about that in just a second. So as I mentioned before, this is the solar and EV charger co-op. So you can also purchase a charger for your electric vehicle if you'd like through the co-op. The unit is going to charge. So there's 3 different kinds of electric chargers. There's a level 1 charger is just like plugging it into your outlet in your house. It takes a very long time to charge your car. Level 3 is an industrial one that takes a lot less time into. And when people talk about our municipalities of the state talk about installing electric chargers around the state, they're talking about a level 3 charger. A level 2 charger is what most people get installed for their EVs at their house or in the garage. That'll take your home. Does anybody here have an electric vehicle? Do you have a level 2 charger for yours? Okay. I'd say overnight is probably the amount of time it would take to charge most cars if the battery's pretty low on that. Those are going to charge about $500 to $700, maybe a little bit more. Installation $500 to $2,000. So the total cost of those could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,700 or a little bit more. But each of the companies that bid on this co-op offer an EV charger if you'd like. So here's your federal tax credit question. The federal tax credit is 26% this year for systems installed this year, 26% for systems installed at any time in 2022. It goes down to 22% the next year in 2023, and then it disappears in 2024. That's the current law. As we all know, there's a lot of debate going on in Washington right now around the infrastructure bills. There's a chance this would change. It wouldn't get worse. It might get better. We don't know. But this is what the law says right now. Lots of different financing options. Very few of us have cash to pay for a system. So you can do a home equity line of credit, standard loans. There are solar loans. These aren't as necessary as they once were because most institutions will cover, if you're eligible for a loan, they'll cover a solar system, but there are some special solar loans out there. A bridge loan is merely a loan on your federal tax credit. They may lend you the amount of money for your equal to your tax credit. And then when you get your tax credit, your tax refund back, you pay off that loan. You can refinance your home and include the solar system. I use this as an example. I don't think this is very frequent, but it does sometimes happen. A friend of mine just purchased a solar array for his house. He refinanced his home and put the solar system in that new loan. The increase in his loan payment plus his new lower electric bill, he added those together. Those two things added together were less than his old electric bill. So he was able to start saving money right away. Now, that may not be your situation, but I'm just saying it's a possibility. It's something I would look into if I were considering a system and wanted to do a home equity line of credit. Or refinance a home. There's a clean energy credit union, other certain credit unions that focus on this. If you are a agricultural business or a rural business, there are loans out there through the USDA Rural Energy for America program or REAP program. If you go to our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/financing, you can find more information about financing options there. All the installers, I believe, I'm pretty sure about this, all the installers that bid on this co-op offer financing through them. Either they themselves offer it or they work with an institution that offers financing through them. So that's another option. So what's next? Again, the 10 solar co-ops that are going around the state. So if you know anybody in those other parts of the state, please pass the word on to them. The website for the Northwest Indiana Co-op is at the bottom of the page that I handed out with the house on one side and the financial example on the other. So you can go to that website and sign up if you want to sign up for the co-op. Also on the back table, there were handouts. If you want to join tonight and you want to fill out the form, there's a form there you can fill out. I will take that tonight and you can join the co-op that way. So a couple different ways to join the co-op. And if you want to get involved in the solar movement that's going on in Indiana, we have a couple of different ways to do that right now. If you want to help, we have volunteers that help table at events, have a display table and answer questions as people like at a farmer's market or a festival. We have people that are part of our social action team, which is a group of folks around the state that are advocating for solar policy with their legislators, either through a phone or an email or a letter, sometimes a visit when COVID lets up. We also have a letter to the editor network. If you would like to join that, we send out information occasionally with information about an issue and suggested text for a letter to the editor. If you want to write one of those, that'd be great. So lots of different ways to get involved. Thank you. That's the email for the Indiana team, as well as my email also. And it's 5 till 8. We try to get this done by 8 so I can answer questions as a group for 5 more minutes, and then I can stick around longer if people have more questions. Any questions at the moment? Yes, Kayla. Sure.
Based on the allowable percentage of that, so any rollover credit is only you will not get rollover credit.
I'm not sure I understand his comment. Could you read that again? Actually, would you? Oh, that's right. No, you can't do that. Go ahead.
Rollover of credit is allowed, but based on the allowable percentage of that.
Right. So if you install in 2022 or 23, you get a 26% rollover credit. If you install in 2021 and 22, you get a 26% rollover credit. If you install in 23, you get a 22%. And if you install in 24, you get 0. But I'm pretty, and I don't know if this is what he's saying, but I'm pretty confident that you can, like if you installed your system in 2023 and you got a 22% tax credit and you didn't use it all, you could roll over into 2024. It's just, if you installed your system in 2024, you wouldn't get a tax credit. And if I didn't understand that, whoever wrote that in, write some more and we'll get it figured out. I'll make sure I get everything right. Any questions here? Yeah.
The only question I have is, here in Michigan City, we have a lot, and I don't know if the technical term is coal dust or whatever it is.
Mhm.
I mean, I wake up every day, go to my car, and pretty much have to wash it down. I don't have a garage. So how does that affect the solar panel? The dust is always like,
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't have an exact answer for you that because I don't have enough examples in Michigan City to be able to draw on. I think in most cases that dust will probably not accumulate to the point where it seriously harm your production because the rain will wash it off.
no, it doesn't know, not on the car.
Well, there's a lot more flat surfaces on a car than there probably would be on a panel because they're at an angle. But I don't know that for sure, so I don't want to give you false hope. But the conditions may be such here in Michigan City that you might want to spray them down more than you might otherwise. But again, I would just use water. I wouldn't use anything else. But I don't have enough examples to be able to give you a good answer about that. I will tell you though, that there's a lot of solar panels that go in the Southwest where the dust is a lot more a problem. And I haven't heard, while people will spray their panels down, I haven't heard people say, oh, we can't do this because it's dust covered all the time. Whatever that's worth. Yeah.
Are those backup batteries a sealed system?
I don't know enough about batteries to understand your question. Could you say more?
Some batteries require monthly or periodic inspection. And when the fluids in the battery are low, you have to add to them. There are also batteries that are sealed. That don't require any maintenance until they're finally worn out.
I believe these are in the latter category. They're sealed.
You've got a
So-
lot of elderly people that found overfilled or not good.
Sure. So for the people online, I'm sorry, the previous question was a lot of coal dust in Michigan City. Will that affect the production of the panels? And so you heard the answer. This question was, are the batteries a sealed system? And the answer is yes. So they don't require maintenance in the sense you got to fill up the, I mean, it's probably a good idea to check on them everyone, just to look at them, but there's nothing you have to fill or anything like that as you go along. Other questions?
Come with a tester too.
I'm sorry, what?
They could come with a tester too, so that you would see on a meter. if the
Yeah, you
battery
could-
is still effective.
Yes, they will have meters that you can tell that, how effective they are. Yep. Other questions? One online.
The savings calculation, oh, this is from Jesse. The savings calculation, does it include the 1-for-1 deal for next year or just reduce?
Read that again, I'm sorry.
The savings calculation, does it include the 1-for-1 deal for next year or just reduce?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand that question, but let me make a stab at an answer, and then Jesse can write again if we didn't get it right. The question I believe is, does the chart that we had with the savings amounts, does that include the 1-for-1 trade? And the answer is, if Jesse, I don't know if it's a man or woman, means the net metering, in other words, 1 kilowatt hour that goes out, you get credit for 1 kilowatt hour in, yes, it does. And it includes that for the 10 years of net metering until 2032. So those 10 years with the net metering are an assumption in that pricing chart that shows the savings. So if that's not the answer, Jesse, that you're looking for, write some more and we'll try to get you the right answer. Okay, great, wonderful. All right, it's 8:00 exactly, so I'm gonna let Nancy say something and we're gonna.
Yeah, Dan, I want to thank Dan very much for his information, and I thought he did a great job fielding all the questions that we have today. And I have one thing to say regarding the coal dust. The plant here will be closed down in 2028. So the coal dust will become a non-issue at that point. So thank you all very much for coming this evening. Our Sustainability Commission meetings are always open to the public. We meet the second Thursday of the month at 5:30 here at City Hall. So thank you much.
I will be around a little bit if anybody has any more questions. And so thank you all for coming very much. Really appreciate it. And to the folks online, thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Oh, yeah.